You know, I would say that it's been way too long since the last Foreverwinter Dev QA dropped, but, you know, I like to think that they had some well-needed rest in that time. But we did end up finally getting one. The radio silence is over, or at least a perceived radio silence. But without further ado, I'm Johnny Lockjaw, and let's talk about it. As usual, let's go over the gameplay questions first. Not a ton here. I would imagine they're saving a lot of it for the upcoming update that's supposed to happen. It sounds like this week. We'll get to that. Now, somebody asked how the giants like Big Green are supposed to work. If you don't know, Big Green is just basically a Leviathan. He's gigantic. He's a big green robot. Big Green. It sounds like they're going to try to implement different modules for the players to interact with, similar to different minigames. It sounds like they're going to try to implement different gigantic weapons to take out these gigantic Hulk-like creatures that you're going to have to, eventually fight, maybe? Who knows? There's going to be different stages and modules in order for you to actually get these things done and actually killed. They want it to be a little more interesting than, say, taking out an AT-AT in Battlefront, for example, where you basically just wrap its legs up and it falls over. They want it to be a little more involved than that. They also are very cognizant and aware that if they make it so involved that it costs them a ton of money, but it's also ultimately not worthwhile to do multiple times, that's also kind of a waste of their potentials. They don't want it to be so far and away expensive and obtuse to prevent most people from being able to complete it, but they also want it to be a little more involved than, say, a QTE or like basic interactions like go here, press that button, go here, press that button, congrats, you beat it. It's gonna have a little more going on. The base premise that Miles and Jeff went over sounds very similar to the way that Destiny raids work. Not so obtuse that they weren't worth doing, but, conventionally interesting and having different mechanics that you would otherwise be doing to the regular game, basically, but kind of contained in its own unique level. And then obviously the boss enemy that you fight in those is the big bad for whatever the season was or whatever was going on with that. So it sounds kind of like a raid system that they're going to try to implement. I don't know how that would work or be done, or if maybe it's actually just going to be a big unit on the map that you go into and then, suddenly you have that to deal with. Again, I'm not 100% on the inner workings of what it is that their plans are. That's just sort of how things sound to me. That'd be interesting, though, to see. I would also be interested to see what it is that they do if they do implement like a raid system, whether you have to like know 10 people to go into it, or if it's just like a 4-person raid. But again, you have to know 4 people. There's like no matchmaking for it. So if you join like a random lobby that's open, but then suddenly you're not ready or interested in doing whatever the raid is that they're planning on doing, they kick you and all that kind of stuff. It'd be interesting to see. I'm sure, obviously the Discord's available for group finding, so that won't be a problem if you're interested in talking with internet strangers. But if you're not, tough luck, I suppose. Kind of funny, but also pretty quick. Somebody asked whether Shoulder Swap was coming. The direct quote from Miles is, it's on the list for this month, so clock it, nerds, it's gonna be here. Now, that goes over all of the gameplay stuff, or I guess I would say this week, but it's really this QA's gameplay stuff, so let's move on to the lore questions. If you've interacted with Lourdes at all, you know that that man really likes his cigarettes. So much, in fact, that apparently he smokes 15 packs in what seems like 10 seconds. So really the question was, how, like, why, how, etc. Why does he do that? How does he do that? There really is no answer as to how, I guess, is at least not that we were given. Obviously, he just sort of inhales that many packs. He's a cybernetically enhanced soldier. But therein lies the thing. So the realistic answer as to why he needs 15 packs, I guess we'll say, is that in order for him to actually feel stuff, because he's so cybernetically enhanced, or as a super soldier or whatever, he does need that many cigarettes, however many are in a pack, to be able to feel whatever nicotine high he's trying to feel at that time. So that's a little fun insight as to the cyborgs and the cybernetically enhanced super soldiers. How much like normal regular people need to consume substance-wise in order to feel the effects of those substances are increased when you're cybernetically or just literally a cyborg. So that's something to keep in mind, I guess. And then also it's interesting to think that like that also probably affects the scavs a little bit, because some of the scavs are what at least appear to be cybernetically enhanced in some way, maybe not to the same degree. Like they're not net runners from Cyberpunk or anything by any means, but they have robot limbs at the very least. Some of them have robot limbs, some of them are robots. I would assume because Gunhead doesn't have any way to consume, he probably doesn't have this problem, but he also doesn't smoke cigarettes or eat, so who knows. A cool little thing that somebody wanted to know, or at least suggested, is if they would have sort of like battlefield radio stations that you could listen to, sort of like for lore purposes in terms of like what it is that the troop movements are, what it is that the different factions are doing, and as well as like different propaganda stuff that you would hear hear on like military radio and all that kind of stuff. They do sound super receptive to that. It sounded like they were kind of going over it themselves. Whether that's true or not, I suppose I don't know at the very least. I don't work there. They're receptive to the idea of different lore-based radio stations for the different factions, or maybe just one faction, or just generally different radio stations that you can get bits and pieces of lore information, and then different like enemy movements, or how your actions, or just how the war is going for whatever side, just different stuff. It sounds really neat. But again, short on lore stuff for this QA. Let's move on to the technical stuff. Somebody had a long-winded way of saying how the team addressed quest issues like the Red Baron banner, as well as any plans on improving the scav progression like armor customization, etc. Pretty detailed answer, actually. They're looking on improving the different core scav systems that are at play, as well as introducing new meta aspects to what it is that the actual gameplay experience is supposed to be. Those new core scav system changes and maybe new systems, I'm not 100%, will then play directly into and tie directly into the actual new meta systems that they're trying to play around with. They will be unveiling this stuff very soon, apparently. It sounds like it's going to be the update for this month, keep up with everything. It's also worth noting for quest rewards, or at least spawning, that not every quest objective or like quest enemy will be able to be completed on every single raid. I'm sure you've already noticed that. That's by design specifically. That isn't a bug or unintentional. It's a design feature specifically from the team to prevent some kind of boring aspect of pick up quest, do quest, turn in quest kind of thing, as well as kind of giving you sort of an avenue to interact with your friends a little bit more in terms of actual gameplay stuff, where you pick up a quest and then you ask your friend to help you try to do that quest, and then you spend however long it takes, however many raids it takes to actually get that objective completed. So it's, it's a little more interactive than that. And then obviously if it comes to bugs that are preventing you from being able to complete quests, Jeff specifically said that they suck and that they're sorry if that ever happens. I know that they don't suck, and I know that coding is really difficult even if I don't code directly. But I do know that the Fundog team fixes these issues rather quickly once they're known. That isn't ever really a persistent problem, or at least it usually isn't. And then they're putting out major gameplay updates often enough to be able to even get most of that completed and fixed, in relatively short time if they can't hotfix it, which they typically end up hotfixing major problems, or at least quest-related problems. Again, early access, you get what you pay for, but some of it's by design, and then if they're bugged, then they work on it. There's obviously some tuning that they can do if things aren't working the way that they intended. And feedback is obviously very appreciated in that matter, so keep that in mind. Somebody asked how done the AI is in terms of its development cycle or process, and then that same person asked if they were working on or thinking about implementing sort of an AI computing slider for players with higher-end PCs to be able to actually get a little more out of the AI, as opposed to the tick rate solution that they have, which basically is the farther the enemy is, to like lower the FPS is for the actual enemy AI units. To answer very quickly, they are receptive to at least allowing players that ability and setting. They just have to figure out whatever the coding is. Whether that ever happens, it's up to see. I'm not certain how that would end up going, or how fried computers are going to end up being because of that. This is obviously a very work in progress game in development and all that kind of stuff, so whether that is something that they get into soon or later down the line will be interesting to see, certainly. The main meat of that is that the AI is nowhere near complete. It needs a lot of work. It definitely sounds like they're working directly with the melee units to sort of make sure that they're actually working as intended and interacting in an intended way. And then generally, some of the AI should interact better. And I believe they're trying to push for the new enemy spawn update, so that'll actually increase the sort of interaction and interactivity between the AI as well, as opposed to them just popping up in the map like they're doing now. That should be done in the next update, as far as it sounds. But yeah, the short of it is that the AI is nowhere near complete, and there's constant work to be done to have them be better and have implementation make sense to the world. And then after that, to kind of go into that, the AI isn't nearly complete enough. Somebody asked if there were going to be new stealth mechanics introduced. Obviously, stealth is a major part of the game. The mechanics listed specifically are stuff like prone, say distractions, like throwing a rock to get enemies to move to a different area or something. Camouflage to make it so that you're harder to see, all that kind of stuff. It seems like those things are missing in a game so heavily reliant on, or at least lore-wise reliant on, you're supposed to try not to engage in any of the enemies, or at least as much as you can. And then a lot of that stuff is currently being worked on. It's just more of an implementation to the AI interaction pathways. It's more about making sure that the AI interaction pathways are set in a way that they actually interact with those specific systems properly. So again, like the hitch on any new stealth gameplay and mechanics really is AI dependent and they're working on other stuff. Obviously, because all of the enemy units interact with everything going on a map all together, basically all at once, all the time, having more variables than are kind of necessary at the present moment is sort of not what it is that the team wants. So, you know, having whatever variables exist already and then the interactions between the players where you're camouflaged and it has to respond accordingly to the fact that you're camouflaged. But how does it do that while interacting with whatever's going on in a specific way to a realistic degree like they want the game to be? On top of that, like the different stealth mechanics, like, oh, say you throw a rock. Well, you know, you're in a battlefield. You're in a war zone. Why would somebody in a war zone react to you throwing a rock near them and then be like, oh my god, that rock just fell. I wonder what that could have been. While there's literal gunshots in the distance or, you know, mech fights or tank fights. Like, it's just... there's a lot of stuff going on. And then you have to consider, too, the cyborgs probably don't even care about noise levels and all that kind of stuff. You just have to kind of run past the hordes at that point. Obviously, with the Rock, you're kind of dealing with the Euruscan and the Eurasian infantry that aren't necessarily just mindless cyborgs. So there's a lot of give and take. Apparently, it's not a high priority to get that stealth stuff sort of figured out, at least in terms of what it is that they're already working on. So it sounds like that'll probably be a later, obviously, it'll be a later update. It's what they want. They want to add stealth stuff to the game. They just have to get the AI working accordingly as well as whatever major things they need to do for all that kind of stuff. Outside of that, that does it for the technical stuff, so let's move into the plan concept. Somebody asked if there were going to be more factions than the current 5 that exist now. And as we've sort of gone over before, there will for sure be more factions in the near future, or at least in the future. It sounds right now that they want to focus more on expanding the different actual sects and variations between the current factions that already exist. It does sound more interesting, too, to sort of flesh out what already exists as opposed to, you know, expanding the pool out to the size of an ocean, but having them not be too deep. That isn't what the Fundog team wants, and they've already expressed that, obviously. So they want to start building up, which means that they're going to have to start actually expanding the units that already exist now to whatever their baseline factions and allegiances and ties within their own factions are. So that sounds interesting, and it'll also be kind of cool to see how those interact with one another, at least in terms of the different factions within the different groups fighting. Think like CIA, FBI, ATF kind of stuff. They all work under the umbrella United States, but they all sort of have their own interests, and sometimes those interests are conflicting. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that kind of stuff shakes up within the different units that are in the Foreverwinter. On top of that, they want to make sure that if they do add a brand new faction, that it makes sense lore-wise and not just like a blanket, hey, there's a new faction you have to do, okay, bye, and then like I platonically kiss you on the forehead and then they let it ride. Like, they don't want to do that. They want to make sure that it at least makes sense for the lore that, hey, there's a new faction that you guys have to deal with now. So whatever that ends up being, it'll be kind of neat, hopefully, to see. But, you know, whenever that's added, I'm sure it'll be important. After that, somebody asked if water can be used to be a different currency set, like to maybe be upgrade material or for crafting or different high-end weapons or things, etc., etc. So it's interesting. Miles gave it up. That'll be a part of the new meta changes in the upcoming update. So we're definitely going to get some of these or all of those features, at least in terms of what it is that water is useful for, as opposed to just a blanket clock, basically, for this is how long you live, haha. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Plus, they're going to be adding the ability for you to share water between the homies, so that'll be kind of neat. After that, somebody asked when or if we're going to get new gun models, and when or if the missing Eurusca vendor is going to be available. And as a positive, there are already new gun models that are probably going to be implemented with the new update. They're just making sure that all of the animations and like the different characters that would interact with those guns actually like can hold them properly and fire them properly, etc., relative to like their rigging for their limbs and stuff. Like they've said in the past, they want to make sure that any gun that's available can be used by both any of the player scavs as well as any of the enemy units. So they need to make sure that they all fit the actual proportions to the people that would use them. So that's cool. That'll be interesting. I can't wait to see what they add, but you know, I don't know what it is. I don't work there. It'll be available in a new update whenever that is. It sounds like it's going to be this month. Again, we'll go over that. After that, somebody asked if the hunter-killer interactions will be expanded or tweaked for each faction for, you know, their own purposes, etc. The answer to that is going to be yes. It does sound like they're going to be adding new interactions for the hunter-killers specifically. Some of those, whatever they be, might be based off of the rep that you have with specific factions and why it is that they're being called based off of your actions and how they affect the factions. So it's kind of broad. They didn't go into a whole lot of detail, but it does sound like they're going to be expanding what it is that they do. They gave an example kind of like you do a thing, obviously, on a map, and then that causes one of the factions to send in a kill squad, basically. And then obviously it's up to the player to sort of interact with it how it is that they see like it would make sense to do. Either they can fight the kill squad, or they can just watch the battle take place with what caused that to happen, or they can just flee the scene and not deal with it at all. So it sounds kind of like they're obviously going to be expanding the AI for that. We'll see how that interacts with everything. Obviously, anything that they add adds more complexity and layers to what else is going on. An already sort of very broad thing that's happening when you're in a level. So we'll see what's going on with that. It'll be super interesting to see. After that, somebody asked if Frozen Swamps is ever going to get a nighttime variant to the map. As they've sort of said before in previous QAs, they are working on adding different variables and map types and different level types like night times or the horror modes for the different maps that are already present. So yes, they are going to be adding that at some point or soon. I'm not certain. Frozen Swamps will be getting a nighttime variant at some point in the future. After that, somebody asked if the different scavs will get certain unique abilities, sort of like how Gunhead has his Gunhead. Basically, somebody asked if these scavs will have different active abilities that you use as opposed to all the passive buffs that are already in the skill tree. Similar to the last one, I answered this before. They are working on implementing different skill trees for the different characters. Everything's very much placeholder and work in progress. They do want to make all of the scavs have their own unique abilities that make them stand out from the pack. What it is that those entail, is kind of up to debate, and we'll see how they go. Lore-wise, I'm not sure what it is that they'd all do differently. Obviously, I think Scab Girl is kind of the easiest one. She just kind of runs faster. That's theoretically her active ability. I have no idea. I've got no clue as to what it is that they'd want to be doing. Bagman's a big guy with big bag. I don't know what he'd do. Maybe he'd throw the bag on top of people as like a melee attack and crush several people with his giant backpack. Yeah, I have no idea. Maybe the old man just perishes from old. I have no idea. We'll see what happens with all that. So that's it for all the planned content. Let's move on to some miscellaneous questions. A kind of fun thing. Somebody asked, what's Valentine's Day like in the foreverwinter world for the frontline soldiers, or like anybody else? That's kind of cute based off of our timing here. Kind of gross. Miles went into some masochistic shit. So, if you want to listen to that, go ahead and do that. It's not great. Valentine's Day, I assume, is not a thing in whatever this world is, or at least to the extent to what it is that we know of Valentine's Day. Typical pleasantries are probably not what it is that is to be expected, certainly. After that, somebody asked if the Foreverwinter is ever going to get written material similar to like comics or different books and stories like Warhammer 40k has. And apparently, yes, they are thinking about it, or at least maybe working on it. It didn't sound very clear on that, whether they're actually working on it already or if planned. Obviously, there's the art book to look forward to, and they were talking about different figures that they were trying to get. I'm not sure where we stand on that. We haven't gotten an update, but it does sound like they want to have some written materials. It might have been a Freudian slip. Miles said that it was funny that Warhammer was mentioned specifically. I'm not certain what that would mean or entail, but I mean, I'm sure that Warhammer has some influence on whatever the story is here, or just general design of things. Obviously, Lourdes is a big super soldier mech guy, pretty space marine-y, so we'll see what's going on with all that. But yeah, we're gonna get some written material probably, or at least are thinking about it. Who writes it, what all that stuff is, or if it'll be a comic book or a graphic novel. Up in the air. Everything's kind of happening all at once. Everything's sort of free flowing. I'm sure that it would be nice to be able to profit off of their IP in separate ways, as opposed to an early access game that they kind of have to continuously be working on all the time. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. After that, somebody asked what the team's vision is for what that game is actually supposed to be when it's basically all said and done. The easiest way for me to sort of summarize it in the quickest possible way is to basically say it's supposed to be hard. Obviously, we sort of already know that. That's what it is kind of now. To a greater or lesser extent, I think it benefits from that. The hardcore aspect of the game is very nice and it's refreshing. I would go watch this answer specifically because Miles and Jeff do a really good job of explaining where it is that they're coming from and what their influences are. And I don't really, I would just have to say it word for word back to you, and it would make more sense for you to listen to them say it. Watch them say it. It's more impactful. It's more meaningful. They did mention that the new updates, taking, what it is that they said into account, will be probably nerfing some of the weapons. So for example, some of the heavier weapons, I would imagine, will be taking longer to reload. So they're actually more risk reward as opposed to empty the mag and then you quick reload like you would any other assault rifle. I imagine they're talking about stuff like painless, or maybe the grenade launchers, or maybe like different different shotguns or something, but like guns where it doesn't make sense for you to just drop a mag and then put a mag back in, they will be tweaking around the reload speeds. Think Resident Evil with a rocket launcher. If you've ever played those games, you shoot the rocket and then it has a pretty sizable reload animation because you're literally feeding the reload, like you're literally feeding the rocket back into the tube so you can shoot it again. Similar concept. They want to make it so that you feel powerful when you use the weapon, but obviously there's a risk to using all of the ammo and expanding it like that, because then you have to take an extensive break before you're able to do that same thing again. So it'll be interesting to see how all that goes. I'm not certain. I'm sure some people will like it and some people won't. That's kind of the way that the world works, though. You can't please everybody in that regard. This is a hardcore survival game. Increased hardcore survival mechanics aren't for you. You might be playing the wrong game. I don't think anybody actually asked this. I think this was a Mads question. She asked if there's anything that they wanted to sort of direct at us, the community, because it's been a while since their last QA. And they did want to apologize for, you know, the perceived radio silence, that the long extended break that they had, or at least in terms of newsletter stuff or QA output was. They did want to assure us that they were working. And then like they spent basically the entire holiday season during Thanksgiving and like the Christmas working on this, and then they put out an update in December, and then they put out a second update like a few weeks later. So we're only like a week or two or three removed from their latest update and patch. Like it's not like they dropped off the face of the earth without saying anything. I think they deserved a break if they took one at all, or if they've taken one at all. It's certainly been a wild ride. They've basically been crunching for half a year, so I think it's fine that they didn't put out any information to us directly. You know, to be clear, they have been interacting with the Discord for as much as that is. So if you're not a part of that already, I would imagine you are if you're watching this, but if you're not, I would get on that. I would go join the Discord. It's pretty important, or at least it's pretty interesting to be a part of that. Regardless, you know, they did apologize for the break. It does sound like we're going to get new improvements on the spawn system and new loot stuff, and then obviously we're going to get new gunplay changes in the new update that is supposed to be coming this month, according to, you know, Miles. We'll see how that goes. I'm not 100%. Obviously, again, I don't work there, so I don't know what everything will entail. We'll see what happens. I don't have any insider information for you, unfortunately, which is I'd like that. But regardless, you know, it's been a while. I do, again, love the persistence that they show, and I love that even though they say that, like, there's a ton of work that they obviously recognize needs to happen, they seem very positive and very cognizant of the fact that they enjoy very much the work that they're doing. So, you know, that's going to put forth better product for us. They want to make sure that the things that they put out for us are as good as possible because they know that it's important, but also it sounds like they enjoy that, which is good because it's going to make it so that we actually enjoy their output better, because they're going to make it better just by sheer virtue of those facts. But yeah, no, it's been a minute since the last one of these. I appreciate you for being here. Do me a favor, like, comment, follow, subscribe. I would genuinely appreciate it if you've made it this far. Once again, I am Johnny Lockjaw. Do me a favor, please don't die, and I will see you in the next one.